water. Then we'll now be looking at the third type of weathering, which is biological weathering. This is brought about by plants and animals, that is plant roots which penetrate, for example, the plant root which penetrates in the cracks of the rock. As the plant root penetrates the rock crevices or the rock cracks, it exerts pressure on the cracks and then thereby splitting the rock. Once the pressure is higher than the binding force of the rock, it will split it, and once it's being splitted, then weathering has actually taken place. Earthworm and termite helps in weathering by burrowing into rocks. When we say that earthworm burrow into rock, we are referring to sedimentary rocks and then our metamorphic rock, because the igneous rock is quite hard, but once it comes to sedimentary rock and then the metamorphic rock, the earthworm and termites can easily burrow into them, and once that happens, the burrowing activity actually will aid weathering. The activities of human beings during farm operations such as plowing, harrowing, and ridging also break down rocks into smaller particles which later form soil. Now we'll be looking at soil profile. Soil profile is defined as the vertical section of the soil, showing a series of horizontal layers of different types of soil. These layers are called horizons. Just as you can see here, the soil profile can be obtained whenever you make a vertical, that is, the soil profile can be obtained whenever you make a vertical cut in the soil. That is, it's just like digging a vertical hole in the soil. You will see different layers which appear to make up the total depth of the soil. The topsoil, also referred to as the horizon A, just as we can see here, is usually made up of partly decayed plant materials and humus. The next is horizon B, and which is referred to as the subsoil. It's much thicker than horizon A, and it consists mostly of inorganic material. The color of the subsoil varies according to its parent material and the amount of organic matter present. That is, the color of the subsoil varies depending on the organic matter present and then the parent materials from which it is being formed. Below this is the parent material, which is also referred to as the horizon C, and below horizon C, just as you can see here, is the horizon D, which is also referred to as the bedrock. A difference of color, texture, and feel and structure will be observed between each horizon. That is, between horizon A and B, there is a variation in the texture, and there is a variation in the color and the structure, and so likewise between B and C, and between C and D. The texture differs between the horizons, and which is due to what makes up, which is due to the texture. What causes the variation is the texture and the materials that makes each horizon. Each horizon is being made up of different sizes of particles and different minerals also. And it is the topsoil, which is our horizon A, which is the one suitable for agricultural purpose, and that it is the one that is rich in nutrients needed by plants, while the other horizons are just there. The plant derives most of its nutrients from the horizon A. Now, our next subtopic is different types of soil. Soil is made up of particles. These particles may be very small or they may be quite big. Soil particles may be a mixture of different sizes in various proportions. Soil is classified according to each classification that have the greater influence. That is, before we can say that this is this soil, it is the proportion of that soil in that sample that would give us, that will determine the type of soil that we are actually looking at. That is, the portion of that soil will give us the characteristic of the sample that we are actually talking about. Now, for sandy soil, just as we are, sandy soils are soil materials that contain 85% or more of sand. The percentage of silt or clay is about 15%. The gritty properties of sand predominates the sample. That is, for a sample, before we can categorize a sample as sandy soil, it must contain 85% of sand, while the remaining 15% could be other materials, could be either clay or silt or loam. And then the other, and we know that sandy soils are gritty to feel, that is, they are not smooth. That also determines, before we can say that a sample of soil is sandy soil, it has to be gritty to feel, that is, it must have a gritty property, and the particles of sandy soil are not sticky to touch. That is, once you hold it on your hand, it doesn't stick to your hand. Now we're not looking at clay soil. Clay soils are made up of smallest and finest particles. That is, their particles are very small, are tiny, and they are fine to touch. It contains 60% or more of clay, less than 40% of sand and or silt. Clay soil has a high capacity to retain water, and it swells on wetting. That is, if you pour water into clay, which is unlike the sandy soil, if you pour water into sandy soil, it will just go down just like that. If you, okay, just like, let's say that there's a mesh under your container. Just like, okay, let's say you pour your sandy soil on the mesh, and you now pour water on the sandy soil. Your water will just go down just like that. That is, it does not have capacity to hold water, to retain water. But for clay soil, if you pour water into clay soil, it has a high capacity to retain water. And then, on pouring water into it, it will swell on wetting. While you are pouring water into it, to swell tends to increase in volume. Then, when you now dry, tends to dry the clay, it will swell, it will shrink. When you are drying it, it will shrink to form lumps, and then also crack readily when it gets dry. That is, after you, just like, let's take, for example, maybe whenever you get a clay, just try, pour water into it, and then for you to know that it's swell, and then try and dry it. You see, by the time it gets dry, you see some crack on the surface of that thing you've molded. Clay soils are sticky to touch. It is important to know that whenever you, okay, let's say the clay that you've molded, you see that parts of the clay particles will stick to your hand. You have to wash it with water to loosen it from your hand, which is unlike this sandy soil that you can just dust off from your hand easily, which is unlike our clay soil, it will stick to your hand. So clay soil has a sticky property, while the sandy soil has a gritty property. The next type of soil is the loamy soil. The loamy soil are a mixture of sand and clay particles with a high proportion of organic matter. They are more fertile than either sand or clay soil. It contains 7 to 27% of clay, 28 to 50% of silt, and less than 52% of soil of sandy soils. That is a mixture of the different types of soil. Due to a high percentage of sandy soil and a lower percentage of clay, it is neither sticky, that is, it is not too sticky like clay, and it is neither sticky to the hand like clay nor gritty like sand. That is, it combines the property of clay and then that of sand, and it's just like standing on the fence, but not really standing on the fence. it combines the property of both. Also, due to high percentage of sandy soil, it allows easy passage of air and water during infiltration and percolation of water, and at the same time retains enough water for plant growth, which is unlike a sandy soil that doesn't retain or that does not retain a high percentage of water being poured on it. Then we have sandy loam soil. Here the properties of sandy soil predominate those of clay and silt. That is, it contains a very high percentage of sandy soil. Then we have the silt, which is another type of soil. The silt soil contains about 80% or more of silt and less than 12% of clay. That is a high percentage of silt, and that silt is a form of sandy soil, but very fine particle, uniform, and then a less percentage of clay, which is 12%. The velvety or smoothie properties are predominant in clay. That is, this property of the smoothness property of soil, whenever we see any soil that is very smooth, is very predominant in clay. It's only clay that is very smooth and it has a velvety property. Sometimes soils are grouped based on predominant particle size, and then we'll be looking at the grouping of soil based on particle size and the feel to touch. That is, when you touch them, how they feel in hand. When we look at the grouping that we are having here, we have gravel as our first type of soil. That is the grouping of soils that we are having here. We have the gravel. The gravel is over 2 mm in size. The particle size, that is the diameter, if we take an average diameter of a gravel, it is more than 2 mm in diameter, and it is very coarse to feel. That is, you can, if you rub it on your hand, you see that it is very coarse to feel. Then we have the coarse sand, which is from 2 mm